Before the Second World War, Europe was home to roughly 9 to 12 million Jewish people. There were Jewish communities in every European country, but the largest Jewish population, more than 3 million, was in Poland. In the countries of Eastern Europe, Jewish communities formed an important part of life in all the big cities, as well as in many smaller towns and villages. It was a lively world that hummed with different ideas about how to live a good life. The majority continued to live their lives much as their parents and grandparents had before them. But others turned their backs on traditional beliefs and ways of life. Instead, they joined mainstream society or became members of political movements that held the promise of a brighter future, not only for Jewish people, but for mankind as a whole. So, across Europe, there were many different ways of being Jewish. There were Jewish people who were deeply religious, those who marked just a few religious festivals, and atheists who didn't believe in God at all. All belonged to a wider world that could be hostile, even dangerous.
Every year, on this evening of remembrance, we solemnly mark Holocaust Memorial Day here in Dublin. We remember 6 million Jews murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators. And we remember other persecuted minorities who were victims of Nazi atrocities. This evening's commemoration provides us with an opportunity to cherish the memory of those who perished and to reflect on the consequences of the Holocaust. I invite our host, Lord Mayor of Dublin, Críonainn Ní Dhomhnaill, to welcome you.
While in fear fáilte cúró bhfuil an seohanniu, chuig an seomar cuin. Is mór an or domsa, mar céad sé rannach an cahar arsa seo, bheith má óstach an imacht náisiúnta seo. It is a great pleasure to host this important national event on behalf of the city and people of Dublin, which is held annually here in the Mansion House. We feel privileged to be here among survivors and descendants of survivors of the Holocaust who made Dublin and Ireland their home. Holocaust Memorial Day marks the date of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau on the 27th of January 1945. Tonight we recall the suffering inflicted on the Jewish people and those of other faiths persecuted during the Holocaust. We will reflect on this and on the suffering still inflicted throughout the world today. We acknowledge the work of Holocaust Education Trust Ireland in its endeavours to educate about the Holocaust and ensure that it is always remembered. Síocháin libh go léir.
I invite Taoiseach, Mr. Enda Kenny TD, to address us.
Áwad vera ar a rialtas go halolanigan. Cean cóla I róchtarán agus gúine úslar fad. I'm honoured to be here to speak at Ireland's 13th Holocaust Memorial Day. Thank you for the invitation. We meet in witness, in mourning and in memory of the millions of innocent Jewish men, women and children and others persecuted and murdered because of their ethnicity, their disability, their sexual orientation, their political affiliations, or their religious beliefs. Sometimes, fleetingly, on crowded platforms of European train stations, you can sometimes get that sense of fear, of shock, of confusion. Adult children shepherding parents, mothers and fathers trying to keep hold of young children, and some vestige of hope, equanimity. What will become of them? What will become of us, our small, sweet family? In his book, Search Warrant, on the disappearance and eventual death in the Holocaust of the young Parisian Jewish girl, Dora Bruder, Nobel laureate Patrick Modiano, writes about last letters thrown from cattle trucks by deportees to be found and posted by families, by kind and random strangers. Browsing in the bookstalls along the Seine, he found, tucked into a book, a letter written by a young man awaiting transport from Drancy camp in Paris. His name was Robert Tatakovsky, born in 1902 in Odessa. Before the war, he wrote a column on art for L'Illustration. He writes to his mother in Paris's 11th arrondissement. Yesterday, I was picked to go. I've been mentally prepared for a long time. The camp is panic-stricken. Men are crying. They are afraid. He ends, I'm leaving this letter unfinished. With all my love, be brave. It's 7 a.m. Be back soon. According to Modiano, the fact this letter was abandoned suggests his entire family and milieu perished. Parisians, rich or poor, or sophisticated, united in their belief that despite the Russian or Polish names, their Parisian accents made them immune. The same could be said of the hundreds of thousands of names read in the snow at remembrance at Auschwitz-Birkenau, as in city after city, Jews believed, we are not other, we are citizens, we have our papers, nothing will happen to us. And it is good that Europe remembers that it did, particularly in the current circumstances. Because in 1938, Europe met at Evian to discuss the perils facing its Jews, and having discussed those perils, closed its borders to the men, women, and children facing them. For some here, your very own families among them. Today, with the refugee crisis from Syria, the men, women, and children are from another faith, but Europe shares with them something so profound, both estimable and inestimable, our common humanity. If we keep our focus on that, there can be no them, only us. And all those fleeting wars and terror must be treated with compassion and respect, according to our shared human and their rights under international conventions and the law. About this time last year, I walked side by side the leaders of Europe and President Hollande in Paris in the aftermath of the massacre at Charlie Hebdo. And as we marched through the streets of that city, I thought of Voltaire's words that tolerance is the consequence of our humanity, and how vital it was that we would defend that tolerance and humanity against hatred and extremism that would dismantle and destroy them. That in our solidarity, we would show the agents of such destruction that to us their actions are anathema, their propositions simply absurd. But Voltaire wrote too that those who can make us believe absurdities can make us commit atrocities, something that the City of Light would see again just a year later, something the Jews of Europe were forced to live by and to die by in their millions in the Holocaust. 6 million people, every one of them an individual, like the shoes belonging to an individual, to a person. At the museum at Auschwitz, The curators keep more than a ton of human hair, 110,000 shoes, 3,800 suitcases, 470 prostheses and orthopedic braces, 379 striped uniforms, 246 prayer shawls, more than 12,000 pots and pans carried by Jews who believed or hoped that they were bound for resettlement. A curator told the New York Times, "The eyeglasses in the exhibition are in one big pile. But in the lab, he began to examine them one by one. One had a screw replaced by a bent needle. Another had a repaired temple. And then this enormous mass of glasses started becoming people. So began the search for the individual. And it is that search for the individual that we will make sure that we see people as who they are, not what they are. The woman from Aleppo, who is a teacher, 17-year-old Aslan, who carried his dog for 500 kilometers, the man in the Calais jungle, a professor of English, an expert in Shakespeare. So this evening we remember other individuals who sought to protect those in need, not because they were Jews or Christians or Muslims or German or Russian or Dutch, but because they were human. Thanks to them, other individuals survived, and some of them are here tonight. Susie Diamond, Jan Kaminski, and Tony Reichenthal. Each year, those who survive the Holocaust grow fewer and fewer in number, and so their testimony becomes more and more crucial. I am struck by how that for each of them, they don't as much tell their story as they relive it. And are we not privileged to be in their presence? This year in Ireland, we commemorate the events of 1916 and reflect on the journey that we as a people and as a nation have taken over 100 years, a century in which the world witnessed the horror of the Shoah. We reflect on how we have developed and how we have changed. While no journey in social development is ever complete, and while many challenges remain, I think we have witnessed a new Ireland, more generous in spirit, open-minded, and accepting of change. So much positive change that has led us to develop a modern nation which encourages diversity and acceptance of others. Last year, we became the first country in the world to make marriage equal, a huge and proud statement by the people of this country, and one that I was proud to be part of. Educating our youth on the events surrounding the Holocaust lessens our chances of repeating the past. The ongoing work of the Holocaust Education Trust is crucial in ensuring that those whose voices are muted by death still speak to us today. In December 2011, Ireland became a full member of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. And we undertook to promote education about the Holocaust in our schools, in our universities, in our communities, and to encourage awareness in other institutions. The Standing Committee on Holocaust Education, Research and Remembrance was established in 2012 to carry out this work. It consists of representatives of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, the Department of Education and Skills, the Department of Justice and Equality, Holocaust Education Trust Ireland, the Irish Jewish Museum, and academia. It is vital work that keeps the necessary horror and memory of the Holocaust alive. And so too does the Crocus Project. This school's initiative was set up in 2005 by the Holocaust Education Trust Ireland for pupils aged 11 years. The children plant yellow crocuses in autumn. This is done in memory of the 1.5 million Jewish children and the hundreds of thousands of other children who died in the Holocaust. This year, 70,000 children across Europe are involved, every one of them a witness to the yellow Star of David that Jews were forced to wear during the Nazi rule. The Crocus Project helps to stimulate and initiate discussion among young people who will one day themselves take positions of standing within our respective communities. These crocuses, as you know, come up through the snows of winter. From darkness and death comes new hope and new life. As at Auschwitz, the cantor sings Il Meliai Rakanim, the traditional Hebrew prayer for the dead. In Europe, we have set our own Shiva for our Jews, not 7 days, but 7 decades. And we will never stop our mourning or indeed our remembering. I don't have time to see much television, but I have an abiding memory of the violinist Maxim Vengerov playing part of a Bach partita in the deserted buildings at Auschwitz, Barracks 28. Surviving accounts show it housed mainly those who were seriously ill with bronchitis or pneumonia or typhus. Holocaust survivor Primo Levi wrote of Auschwitz, "Even in this place one can survive, and therefore one must want to survive, to tell the story, to bear witness, and that to survive we must force ourselves to save at least the skeleton, the scaffolding, the form of civilization. We are slaves, deprived of every right, exposed to every insult, condemned to certain death. But we still possess one power, and we must defend it with all our strength, for it is the last, the power to refuse our consent. And today we still refuse, and because we do, we say, never again."
Ireland was amongst 46 nations that signed the Stockholm Declaration in the year 2000. This was an international agreement between governments to commemorate and educate about the Holocaust and to commit to combating all forms of intolerance. I invite Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade, Mr. Charles Flanagan, TD, to read an excerpt from this important document.
We, the governments attending the Stockholm International Forum on the Holocaust, recognise that this was a tragically defining episode of the 20th century, a crisis for European civilization, and a universal catastrophe for all humanity. In declaring that the Holocaust fundamentally challenged the foundations of civilization, we share a commitment to commemorate all of the victims of the Holocaust and to honour all those who stood against it. The horrors that engulfed the Jewish people and others must forever be seared in our collective memory. With humanity still scarred by anti-Semitism, genocide, ethnic cleansing, racism, xenophobia, and other expressions of hatred, we pledge to fight against these evils and to reaffirm our common aspiration for a democratic and tolerant society, free of prejudice and other forms of bigotry.
One of our greatest challenges is teaching the lessons of the Holocaust for the future. I invite former President of Ireland, Mary Robinson, to give her reading.
The Holocaust is an event that happened in the midst of societies resembling our own. It was mainly about the Jewish people, but its lessons are universal. The Holocaust was intended not to have any witnesses. The Jews were not supposed to survive. The intention was to erase an entire people from the history and memory of the world. Everything was planned, thought out, and organized. The existence of gas chambers was kept secret. It was kept hidden like a state secret. It was the survivors themselves who first acknowledged their responsibility for passing on knowledge of the Holocaust and keeping its memory alive. For this reason, it's essential to teach about the Shoah, whether there are Jews in your respective countries or not, whether there are many or few or none left. The Holocaust must never be diminished, denied, or trivialized.
As the Nazi Party strengthened its hold on Germany, it made no secret of its anti-Semitic ideology, condemning Jews and all things Jewish as un-German. I invite the writer Sebastian Barry to give his reading about the book burnings that erupted throughout Germany in March 1933.
Jewish books, books by Jewish authors and books about Jews were burned in public bonfires along with other books considered by Hitler and the Nazis to be degenerate. Students came forward with whole armfuls of books while schoolboys screamed into the microphone their condemnation of this and that author. And as each name was mentioned, the crowd booed and hissed. Some of the finest works of German Jewish literature, history, philosophy, art, and science were destroyed as Jewish German cultural heritage was obliterated. The writer Heinrich Heine had prophetically remarked 100 years earlier, "Where they burn books, they will, in the end, burn human beings."
In 1935, the Nuremberg laws deprived Jews of their German citizenship. Jewish people were classified as a race and dismissed from their places of work. Gradually, Jewish people were squeezed out of German society. I invite Clement Essebauman to give his reading on the impact of these anti-Jewish restrictions.
Jews were dismissed from the civil service, the army, universities, and the media. Jewish shops, businesses, banks, and bank accounts were closed or confiscated. Property and valuables belonging to Jews were requisitioned. Jews were no longer allowed to go to restaurants, bars, bookshops, barbers, cafes, swimming pools, or ice rinks. They were not allowed to sit on benches in public parks because they had "Not for Jews" stenciled on them. They couldn't ride on trams, go to the cinema, the theater, or to the opera. Even if they could, they would not hear music written by Jews, played by Jews, or sung by Jews.
By July 1938, as pressure was increased on Jews to leave Germany and German-occupied lands, hundreds of thousands tried to flee. President Roosevelt convened an international conference in France to consider the Jewish refugee crisis that was unfolding. I invite Sue Conlon, CEO of the Irish Refugee Council, to tell us about the Evian Conference and its parallels in our world today.
"32 countries were represented at the conference, including Ireland, where delegates were asked if they would accept Jewish refugees. Most countries said they had no room for Jews, or that their quotas were already full. One country even stated that no Jew is too many. With nowhere to turn, the Jews found themselves trapped within their own borders. Today, as the world debates the difficulties arising from vast numbers of refugees requesting asylum in Europe, we are reminded of similar discussions that took place during the years of the Holocaust. Images of boats crossing the Mediterranean, crammed with desperate refugees, remind us of similar voyages undertaken by Jewish refugees during the Second World War. The St. Louis set sail from Hamburg in 1939, bound for the United States, with 937 Jews on board. US visas never materialized, and permission to land in the US was rescinded. The ship was forced to return to Europe, where the majority of the passengers eventually perished. The Struma, which set sail for Turkey in 1942, with 769 passengers on board, was stranded in Istanbul harbour. It was denied assistance and was eventually sunk in the Black Sea, where most of the refugees drowned. Not a lot has changed in the past 75 years.
The state-sanctioned violence of Kristallnacht on the 9th of November 1938 marked a turning point in Jewish persecution. I invite Leonard Abrahamson, President of the Jewish Representative Council of Ireland, to tell us about the November pogrom.
Kristallnacht erupted across Germany and Austria, during which hundreds of Jewish synagogues, homes, schools, and businesses were destroyed and set ablaze. Windows were smashed, leaving the streets strewn with glass. 91 Jews were murdered that night, and more than 30,000 Jewish men were thrown into concentration camps. After the destruction, the Jewish communities were fined 1 billion Reichsmarks to pay for the damage. The violence of Kristallnacht convinced the Jews of Germany and Austria that they were in imminent danger.
With the outbreak of World War II, the German armies swept through Europe. The Nazis forced Jews to wear identifying marks. The Star of David, which had always been a symbol of pride for the Jewish people, was turned into a symbol of humiliation. I invite Jonathan Hanley to read from the diary of 16-year-old Moshe from Holland about wearing the yellow star.
An order was issued that from now on Jews have to wear a yellow star-shaped patch. The order tells exactly how big the star patch must be, and must be sewn on every outer garment, jacket or coat. This badge of shame was the Star of David, on which the word Jew was written.
A small number of Jewish Holocaust survivors live in Ireland. All of them were children during the time of the Holocaust, and all of them found their way to Ireland by different means. Each of them lost many family members, and each has his or her own personal tale of survival. I invite Tommy Reichenthal to tell us about his experiences during the Holocaust.
I'm here today not because who I am, but because what I am. I'm a Jew, and I'm a survivor of the Holocaust. I was born in 1935 in Slovakia. I was 9-year-old when I was captured by the Nazis, along with my mother, grandmother, aunt, brother, and cousin. We were herded into a cattle car, and from that moment onwards, we were treated like animals. There was no privacy or hygiene. The stench and condition were unbearable. Eventually, after 7 nights, the cattle car train stopped. The doors were opened, and we were greeted by a shout from the SS with gun at the ready and the barking of their Alsatian dog. We had arrived at our destination, Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. I was there from November 1944 until the liberation of the camp in April 1945. I was a witness as a 9-year-old boy. Is impossible to describe. The starvation, the cruelty of the camp guard, the cold and disease. People were just skin and bone and looking like a living skeleton. Were walking around very slowly, some of them dropping to the ground, never to get up again. They were dying in their hundreds, their emaciated bodies left where they fell or thrown into the heap. In front of our barracks, there were piles of decomposing corpses. For many prisoners in Bergen-Belsen, the conditions were too much to bear, and they threw themselves on the barbed wire at night to be shot in order to put an end to their misery. We found their corpses there in the morning. 70,000 prisoners of Bergen-Belsen are buried there in mass grave. I lost 35 members of my family in the Holocaust.
More than 1,000 ghettos were created throughout Nazi-occupied Europe. I invite Brendan Kenny of Dublin City Council to tell us about the ghettos, and Abs Dunn to read from the diary of 13-year-old Eva from Romania.
It is estimated that more than 1 million Jews died in the ghettos which were created in every country occupied by the Germans. They were established in poor and run-down areas of cities and large towns, with little sanitation, chronic overcrowding, and starvation rations. Ghettos were usually located close to railways and often near killing sites or death camps. Many ghettos were walled in or fenced off, and Jews who left them without permission were severely punished. The cruelty, starvation, overcrowding, and disease all contributed to the death toll. Although there are heroic stories of resistance, most of the ghetto populations were murdered and there were few survivors.
The fence was finished and nobody can go out or come in. And on every house they've posted a notice which tells exactly what we are allowed to do. Actually, everything is forbidden. But the most awful thing is that the punishment for everything is death. It doesn't actually say that this punishment also applies to children, but I think it does apply to us too.
I invite Enda O'Neill of the UNHCR in Ireland to tell us about the brutality of deportation.
Roundups and deportations to ghettos, concentration camps, and death camps were a cause of great terror for the Jews and other victims of the Nazis. They did not always know where they were being deported to, having been told cynically that they were being resettled in the East. However, once they experienced the cattle cars, all illusions were dispelled. Many survivors tell us they were treated worse than animals. There are horrific testimonies of those who survived deportation, describing the brutality, roughness, and cruelty towards the elderly, the infirm, and small children, as well as all the other hapless victims.
I invite Fintan O'Toole to tell us about the camp system operated by the SS, and Bartholomew Franklin will read from the diary of 14-year-old Kitty from Poland, who survived Auschwitz-Birkenau.
There were hundreds of concentration camps, slave labor camps, and transit camps throughout the territories of the Third Reich. Jews and others incarcerated in these camps were worked or beaten to death. They also perished from brutality, exhaustion, cold, hunger, and disease. 6 death camps were established by the Nazis, all of them on Polish soil, where approximately 3 million Jews and thousands of other victims were murdered in gas chambers. Prisoners were selected to live or die. 90% were selected for death. They were ushered into undressing areas where they were told to leave their clothes neatly on the numbered pegs and to tie their shoes together to make them easier to find when they came back from the showers. They never came back. Their clothing, shoes, and personal belongings were sorted and sold in markets back in Germany. Human hair was used in the manufacture of textiles. This systematic industrial process of murder was unprecedented in human history.
As evening came, the whole sky was red. Smoke and flames were pouring out of all the chimneys. None of us slept that night. It was no longer possible to pretend, even to yourself, that the stories were not really true. All that we had heard and guessed was now before our eyes. Here were the death factories.
When the German army invaded Russia in June 1941, it was followed by killing squads called Einsatzgruppen. Agnes Burnell's wartime broadcasts caused a diversion of a train from Belsen en route to the gas chambers. This saved the lives of 2,500 prisoners, including her first cousin, Ilma Gonda. I invite her son, Mark Leslie, to give his reading about the killing squads operating in the Eastern Territories.
The killing squads rounded up Jews in the shetels, towns, and villages, forcing them into cemeteries, forests, and ravines, where thousands were murdered at point-blank range. Many had to dig their own graves before being shot into them. Entire communities were annihilated, and it is estimated that more than 1.5 million Jews were murdered by the Einsatzgruppen.
Holocaust survivor Jan Kaminski was just 10 years old when the Jewish population of Bilgoraj, his native village in Poland, was wiped out. I invite his daughter, Jadźka Kaminska, to read Jan's story. Jan is also here with us this evening.
My father was born Chaim Schulz-Hibner, the second of 4 children in the town of Bilgoraj in eastern Poland. The Nazi death camp of Belzec was established about 70 kilometres away. At the time, 5,000 Jews lived in Bulgaria, which was more than half the population of the town. As Nazi killing squads swept through the region, my father's family were incarcerated in a ghetto in the centre of the town. Later, on the 3rd and 9th of November 1942, the Jewish population of Bulgaria were dispatched to certain and immediate death to the Belzec death camp. During this final ghetto roundup, my father fled into a nearby forest and became permanently separated from his family, never to see them again. It was no longer safe for him to identify as Jewish, and he became Jan Kaminsky, surviving the war on the run, foraging and hiding in woods, living on farms and always hiding. Eventually, in July 1944, he linked up with the Russian Army's Polish Corps and became a child soldier in the 21st Artillery Regiment. After liberation, my father spent time in Europe before eventually coming to England and then Ireland as a political refugee. When the war ended, we learned that the once flourishing Jewish communities of Poland had been completely destroyed. My father's entire family had been wiped out. His parents, Suslam, Mindla, and his sisters Hanna Matla, Rivka, and baby brother, whose name was not yet recorded, had all disappeared. Anti-Semitism still prevailed in Poland and elsewhere, and pogroms against Jews were still taking place. It was impossible to think of rebuilding Jewish life in Poland at that time. Today there is a modest project of Jewish revival taking place in Bulgaria, but so far, after 30 years of searching for them, no trace of my father's direct family have been found.
Word reached Berlin that some members of the killing squads found their work distressing. This prompted the convening of a special conference to discuss a more efficient way of killing Jews. I invite Éadán Ó Ríordáin, TD, Minister of State for New Communities, to give his reading about the Wannsee Conference.
Reinhard Heydrich convened the Wannsee Conference, at which 15 high-ranking Nazis and government officials were asked to endorse Hitler's plans to totally annihilate the Jews of Europe. Adolf Eichmann presented the delegates with a list of the number of Jews living in each European country who the Nazis intended to kill. Ireland appears on the list with a total of 4,000 Jews. The delegates debated at length who was Jewish, according to bloodline considerations, and discussed evacuation and resettlement, euphemisms for murder. They concluded that a more efficient method of killing was necessary, one that would produce little residue and spare those operating the killing sites the negative psychological trauma of face-to-face killing. Over fine food, brandy, and cigars, it took the delegates less than 2 hours to unanimously endorse Hitler's final solution to the Jewish question, the murder of the Jewish people by poison gas.
I invite David White, chairman of the Dublin Jewish Progressive Congregation, to give his reading about the uniqueness of the Holocaust for the Jewish people.
The final solution was a systematic attempt by the Nazis and their collaborators to murder every Jew in every country of Europe, including those living in the countries of North Africa. 6 million Jews, 2/3 of European Jewry, perished in the Holocaust. 1.5 million of these victims were children. The Nazis also murdered millions of other victims, But as Elie Wiesel reminds us, it is true that not all victims were Jews, but all the Jews were victims.
Every victim of the Nazis was targeted because they did not conform to Nazi ideology. Every one of the Jews murdered in the Holocaust was killed because he or she was Jewish. They were teachers, professors, rabbis, economists, academics, doctors, surgeons, nurses, vets, and lawyers. They were writers, actors, musicians, artists, engineers, pharmacists, scholars, and students. They were war veterans, policemen, industrialists, peasants, farmers, businessmen, laborers, peddlers, shopkeepers, clerks, and civil servants. They were the elderly, housewives, widows, school children, and babies. We must prevent future generations from thinking of the Holocaust in terms of anonymous, faceless numbers. Each victim has a name. Several people living in Ireland, Jews and non-Jews, lost cherished family members in the Holocaust, whose names we have included on the scroll of names. In this small way, we honour their memory and give them a personal Irish memorial. I invite pupils of Stratford College, Dublin, Laurel Hill Colóiste FCJ, Limerick, Colóiste Dúlig, Coolock, and Newtown School, Waterford, to read from the scroll of names.
Max Heller, Czechoslovakia, age 73. Clara Heller, Czechoslovakia, age 68. Gisela Molnar, Hungary, age 35. Sander Molnar, Hungary. Bejla Hirschberg, Poland, age 39. Mateusz Hirschberg, Poland, aged 41. Ruszla Orzel, Poland, age 38. Fajvel Orzel, Poland, age 39. Slama Urbach, Poland, age 64. Ursh Urbach, Poland, age 32. Taba Urbach, Poland, age 30. David Joseph Urbach, Poland, age 45. Saul Urbach, Poland, age 14.
Laja Fela, Poland, age 12. Nukim Mordefai, Poland, age 10. Ruszla Golda Urbach, age 8. Sarah Urbach, age 2. Chiel Urbach, Poland, age 41. Simon Urbach, Poland, age 17. Nukim Urbach, Poland, age 30. Fela Urbach, Poland, age 44. Perla Urbach, Poland, age 39. Friedmenta Urbach, Poland, age 64.
Moses Frankel, Vienna, age 16. Walter Frankel, Vienna, age 15. Herbert Frankel, Vienna, age 14. Fritz Frankel, Vienna, age 13. Zygmunt Frankel, Vienna, age 8. Solomon Delmont, Amsterdam, age 62. Caroline Wolf, Germany. Martin Wolf, Germany. Wolfgang Wolf, Germany. Sally Wolf, Germany. Henrietta Wolf, Germany. Rosetta Wolf, Germany.
Lithuania. David Philip, Germany, age 62. Rekha Philip, Germany, age 54. Leopold Philip, age 61. Julia Philip, age 61. Dagbert Philip, age 59. Louis Philip, Minsk, age 50. Valeria Philip. Rosalia Shaimovich, Slovakia, age 76. Julius Mayer, Slovakia, age 50. Geza Sori, Slovakia, age 46. Oskar Shimovic, Slovakia, age 39. Adela Fries, Slovakia, age 45.
Katarina Fries, Slovakia, age 16. Agnes Fries, Slovakia, age 10. Ezekiel Rekental, Slovakia. Katarina Rekental, Slovakia. Kalmar Rekental, Slovakia. Ilona Rekental, Slovakia. Gita Rekental, Slovakia. Ibi Rekental, Slovakia. Desider Rekental, Slovakia, age 33. Ferdinand Alt, Slovakia. Renka Alt, Slovakia. Erna Elbert, Slovakia.
Joseph Drexler, Czechoslovakia. Bejiska Drexler, Czechoslovakia, aged 46. Paul Drexler, Czechoslovakia, age 54. Meta Drexler, Czechoslovakia, age 41. Bella Perlberg, Czechoslovakia, age 64. Irma Popper, Czechoslovakia, age 60. Jor Mataya, Croatia, age 45. Ivica Mataya, Croatia, age 24. Ankia Mataya, Croatia, age 22. Kalman Rosenthal, Ukraine, age 66. Eleonora Rosenthal, Poland, age 62. Abraham Susil, Greece, age 63.
Age 49. Regan Susil, Greece. Rabé Susil, Greece, age 45. Marta Susil, Greece. Sabti Satul, Greece, age 41. Lucy Satil, Greece. Moshe Young Toff Susil, Greece, age 43. Adele Susil, Greece. Adjourn Satil, Brudo, Greece, age 33. Emil Brudo, Greece. The Cecile children, Greece.
Austria, age
Henry
56.
Simha
Zaks, Lithuania, age 61. Rivka Zaks, Lithuania, age 55. Beryl Zaks, Lithuania. Susu Zaks, Lithuania. Nachman Zaks, Lithuania. Hannah Zaks, Lithuania, age 56. Aaron Zaks, Lithuania. Hannah Shurhoy, Lithuania. Joel Dov Zaks, Lithuania, age 40. Bennett Zaks, Lithuania, aged 38. Leah Zidak, Lithuania, aged 34. Gettel Zaks,
Sheena
Lithuania,
Zaks,
aged
Lithuania.
34.
Masha Zaks, Lithuania. Rosa Zaks, Lithuania. Toile Fega Fakler, Poland, age 47. David Meyer Fakler, Poland, age 45. Mosh Fakler, Poland, age 68. Gola Fakler, age 64. Shendel Malikman, Poland, age 66. Yekel Malikman, Poland, age 45. Theo Malikman, Poland, age 45. Joseph Malikman, Poland, age 41. Pepi Girzeb,
Poland,
age
33.
38.
Chaim Meyer Milechman, Poland, age 28. Nusen Noter Faklea, Poland, age 34. Esther Zarker Jakubowicz, Poland, age 31. Mim Milechman, Poland, age 67. Levi Faklea, Germany, age 36. Izzy Faklea, Germany, age 23. Nathan Faklea, Germany, age 21. Johanna Karlsberg Zomia, Germany, age 55. Emil Zomia, Germany, age 65. Etty Steinberg, Czechoslovakia, age 28. Leon
Abram,
Gluck,
Poland,
Paris,
age 45. Osea Yosef Abram,
Latvia, age 19. Sigmund Selig Kohn, Germany, age 67. Ida Kohn, Germany, age 66. Heinrich Erbst, Germany, age 64. Carolina Erbst, Germany, age 64. Else Zimak, Germany, age 27. Denny Zimak, Germany, age 9 months. Abraham Umberg, Germany, age 58. Emma Umberg, Germany, age 57. Gerda Feist, Germany,
Karl
age
Yerman,
22.
Poland, age 28.
Fanny Kaufman, Germany,
David
age
Yerman,
60.
Poland, age 33. Hanna Matler Zibner, Poland, age 11. Rivka Zibner, Poland, age 7. Baby Zibner, Poland, age 2. Mindela Zibner, Poland. Julim Zibner, Poland. Frandela Zibner, Poland. Daughter of Frandela Zibner, Poland. Shindela Zibner, Poland. Joseph Zibner, Poland, age 59.
Arbeit in Fabrik, Drehter vor dem Suhr, vor dem Flöchs und neu verstrickt. Heute geht auf finstere, da es scheint zu lang, und das Herz so verklemmt, tut ihrer Säuberhang. Heute geht auf finstere, da es scheint zu lang, und das Herz so verklemmt, tut ihrer Säuberhang. Ihr getreuer Herrscher ist weg nicht tot, sind von jenen Schamesson, sind von jener Show, ist vertreuet Rivkele, Jome Tag und Nacht, und hat sie beim Redele, sie und sie tracht, ist vertreuet Rivkele, Jome Tag und Nacht, und hat sie beim Redele, sie und sie tracht. Mein lieben Kerl, lebt noch zu. Sie in Konzentrationslager, Arbeit schwer und Ruhe. Oi, wie finster ist ihm dort, bitter ist mir dort. Sind von jenen Schamesson, sind von jener Schau.
The timing of Holocaust Memorial Day is linked to the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau by the Soviet Army on the 27th of January 1945. I invite World War II veteran Albert Sutton, who participated in the liberation of Europe and Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, to give his reading, and Rebecca Murray will read from the diary of 12-year-old Chava from Poland.
I was in Germany at the end of the war with the Royal Air Force when we were asked by other British forces to assist in opening some of the concentration camps in the region. As we approached Bergen-Belsen, we were assaulted by an indescribable stench which reached us a few miles away from the gates. Once inside the camp, we saw piles of corpses, the emaciated survivors, and ghost-like victims dying in front of our eyes. On confronting the horrors of the camps, we were glad to be of help even at this late stage, and all of us felt our military service had been worthwhile. On meeting survivors like Susie and Tommy, I would do it all again. Thank you.
We had been liberated. I was no longer only a number doomed to die in a Nazi gas chamber, a prisoner without the right to life. Germany had been defeated. Once again, I was an ordinary girl. True, I was different from other girls my age, very different in many ways, but I was free.
In 1963, Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Authority in Israel, inaugurated the award of Righteous Amongst the Nations to honor non-Jews who risked their lives and those of their families to help save Jews during the Holocaust. I invite Sarah Allen Stacey of Trinity College Dublin to tell us about these heroic people.
Only a fraction of the Jewish people survived, and yet thousands of people in every country occupied by the Third Reich risked their lives to save Jews during the Holocaust, often putting their own families at risk. There are over 25,000 names of righteous listed in the Yad Vashem records, but the true number is probably double that figure. Irene Sendler was a young social worker in the Warsaw Ghetto who saved 2,500 Jewish children by finding them Polish families where they were reared in safety. She kept careful records of the Jewish families of these children and also of the new Polish families she was placing them in. Most of the Jewish parents were murdered during the Holocaust, but in time, many of the original Jewish children learned of their true identities and that they had been saved by non-Jewish people. Not only those Jews who have been personally saved by the righteous owe them their lives, but all of their descendants do too. As the Talmudic verse teaches us, for he who saves one life is regarded as if he has saved the world entire.
A great number of Holocaust survivors made their homes in Israel after the war. I invite His Excellency, Mr. Ze'ev Boker, Ambassador of Israel to Ireland, to give his reading about the close association with Israel and the Shoah.
From the darkness of the Shoah, the last remains of the European Jewry emerged from the camps, from the forest and from the death march to try and rekindle their spark of life. Some of the survivors of the Holocaust came to Israel, the Jewish state. A number arrived to pre-state Israel enjoyed the fellow Jews in long-established communities there. They rebuilt their lives and fought for the establishment of the State of Israel, which was a realization of the Zionist vision. My own father managed to escape Poland and the Shoah to pre-state Israel, and then dedicated his life to bringing survivors there. In their darkest hour, the survivors of Shoah found light in the fledgling Jewish state. Such light was also found in the actions of the righteous among the nations, who were a small minority who acted heroically to save the Jews, sometimes to the point of sacrificing their own lives. Proof that evil will not have the last word. The foundation of the State of Israel were built with the historical lessons of the Shoah in mind. That is, another Holocaust will never be allowed to happen again. Our people will never again be subjected to prejudice, racism, and not condemned to death merely for being born Jews. The Shoah taught us that we must not rely on others for protection. We must defend ourselves. That's why the State of Israel is so important for the Jewish people. Anti-Semitism and other forms of racism present a threat to all of us. The Shoah showed us the destructive power of hatred. These days, there is a new kind of anti-Semitism which manifests itself simultaneously against Jewish people, Zionism, and Israel. It also shows itself in the Holocaust denial and the trivialization and the mocking of the Shoah, which so often emanates from the Iranian regime, other countries in the Middle East, as well as from some voices in Europe. We must commit ourselves to fighting this anti-Semitism through education and action while combating all forms of racism in our world.
Genocides have been taking place for centuries. I invite Anna Maria Biro, Director of the Tom Lantos Institute of Human Rights in Budapest, to give her reading.
In all cases of genocide, people have been targeted because of their ethnicity, religious and cultural affiliations. In Armenia, over 1 million people were murdered between 1915 and 1923. In Cambodia in the 1970s, it is estimated that 2 million people were murdered by the Khmer Rouge, and in Rwanda in the 90s, over 1 million people were murdered, often by neighbors and people they knew, who joined the killing squads in hand-to-hand killing. In Bosnia, approximately 8,000 Muslim men and boys were massacred in Srebrenica in 1995, in the single largest mass murder in Europe since 1945. The Holocaust is the name given to one specific case of genocide that was unprecedented in its totality: the attempt to destroy the Jewish people of Europe and all traces of Jewish culture, history, and memory. By the end of the Holocaust, 6 million Jewish men, women, and children had been murdered in ghettos, mass shootings, concentration camps, and in death camps. The genocide of the Roma took place during the Holocaust, as did the murder of thousands of others who were victims of Nazi atrocities. Genocide is not a single event in time, but a gradual process that begins when discrimination, racism, and hatred are not checked, when people are denied their human rights and their civil rights. For this reason, it is important that we respect each other's differences, and when we see injustice, we speak out.
I invite Andrew Baker, Director of International Jewish Affairs for the American Jewish Community, and personal representative of the OSCE Chair in Office on Combating Anti-Semitism, to give his reading.
The mass murder of European Jews and the physical looting and destruction of their possessions in the Holocaust left an indelible scar. Few people imagined that Jewish life could be rebuilt on such troubled soil. And if it was hard to imagine a revival of Jewish life in Europe, harder still to think those who remained would one day feel optimism and hope for the future. Yet that is what happened over decades in a prosperous and more united Europe. As reconciliation replaced mistrust among the states of Europe, those same nations began a process of critical self-evaluation. This included an acknowledgement of the role that they and their citizens played in the Holocaust. It was this process, as much as the steadily improving economic conditions, that restored European Jews' sense of confidence. But today we must acknowledge that many of them live more with anxiety and uncertainty than with hope and optimism. Jewish leaders in France warn their congregants, for safety's sake, not to wear their kippot in public. Heavily armed police patrol in front of the synagogues in Sweden and Denmark. The military is mobilized to guard Jewish schools in Belgium. Hungarian Jews watch as a populist government honors fascist-era leaders complicit in the crimes of the Holocaust. Most European states have come to terms with their past, but can they handle the present? Can they deal with the fact that so many of today's anti-Semitic incidents are coming largely from elements in the Arab and Muslim population, itself a victim of prejudice and discrimination? Will they be able to educate for tolerance and combat anti-Semitism where they are most needed? And Holocaust remembrance rings hollow in the presence of voices demonizing the Jewish state and calling for a boycott of Israel's institutions and its products. Anti-Zionism is frequently a mask for anti-Semitism, and Israel and European Jews alike are its targets. Remembering that genocidal tragedy of the last century must lead us to address the challenges we face in the present one.
There are thousands of children of Holocaust survivors around the world who are referred to as second generation. Many are acutely aware of their legacy and of the responsibility they feel in telling their parents' stories. But for many, it is not so straightforward. I invite Klaus Unger to tell us about his experience of being second generation.
There are many like me who've grown up knowing that their parents or grandparents survived the Holocaust but do not know their actual stories or what happened to them and to their families. They just couldn't talk about it and never did. Most second-generation children are in their 60s and 70s today. They find that there is a void in their family history, a huge gap which they are struggling to fill with information. Who were their grandparents, their aunts, uncles, and cousins? Where did they come from? What happened to them and to the rest of the family? How many survived? If parents have passed away without telling their stories, it's too late to hear their testimony, and it is lost. If parents are still with us, it's often too painful for them to recount their experiences and too difficult for us to implore them to do so. For some of us who so fervently want to know their family history, it's like staring into a bottomless chasm.
Bob Collis, a volunteer doctor who worked in Bergen-Belsen immediately after the war, brought 6 orphans back with him to Ireland. Amongst those children were brother and sister Zoltan and Edith Zinn Collis, whom Bob reared in his own home. They took Bob's name as part of their own and lived fulfilling lives in Ireland for more than 60 years. They both passed away in December 2012, leaving behind their Irish families, many of whom are with us here this evening. Susie and Terry Samuels, born in Hungary, were another brother and sister whom Bob brought to Ireland. I invite Holocaust survivor Susie Diamond to tell her story.
I was born Zsuzsi Molnar in 1942. We were a small family comprising my mother Gisela, my father Sandor, my brother Terry, and myself. In 1944, Adolf Eichmann oversaw the roundup and deportation of more than 430,000 Hungarian Jews to Auschwitz-Birkenau, where most of them perished in the gas chambers. During these months, the Gestapo came for my mother, brother, and me. Our parents had perished. Terry and I were very young children when we came to Ireland and had been told that we were the only 2 members of our family to have survived the Holocaust. But last year, my story changed. In spring 2015, Holocaust Educational Trust Ireland was contacted by someone in Hungary called Sandor Molnar, who thought he might be related to me. Over the course of emails and exchange of photographs and documents, it transpires that he is indeed a relation. He is my first cousin. He is named after my father. He has filled in a few details about my family, which I had not previously known. I have learned that my father was one of 4 brothers who lived in a small town of Korczak, about 100 miles from Budapest, where they ran a timber business. My new cousin, who was born after the war, is the son of the youngest brother, Andor, who survived the Holocaust, along with another brother, Laszlo. My father and the 4th brother, Bela, perished in a Russian labor camp in 1943. Last June, I visited Korczak and saw my grandfather's house, the Jewish cemetery where my grandparents are buried, and the synagogue where all my family prayed. 778 Jews lived in Korczak before the war. 461 of them were murdered in the Holocaust. There is a memorial scroll on the synagogue wall recording the Jews from Korczak who perished in the Holocaust. My family is listed on it, but now the scroll has to be corrected because my brother and I survived. I am gradually being introduced to new first cousins and their children living in Hungary and the United States. This is all very new information for me to absorb, as a very emotional chapter in my personal story is beginning to unfold.
The first Holocaust Memorial in Ireland was unveiled in 1995 in the Garden of Europe in Listowel, County Kerry. Paddy Fitzgibbon, who inaugurated the project, delivered a moving speech at the time. I invite Mrs. Justice Susan Denham, Chief Justice, to read an extract from Paddy's profound words on that occasion.
Our generation, and the generation or 2 after us, will be the last that will be able to say that we stood and shook the hands of some of those who survived. Go home. from this place and tell your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren that today in Listowel you looked into eyes that witnessed the most cataclysmic event ever unleashed by mankind upon mankind. Tell them that you met people who will still be remembered and still talked about and still wept over 10,000 years from now. Because if they are not, there will be no hope for us at all. The Holocaust happened, and it can happen again. And every one of us, if only out of our own sense of self-preservation, has a solemn duty to ensure that nothing like it ever occurs again.
Please stand as we observe a minute's silence in the memory of the men, women, and children who perished in the Holocaust. It is customary at Holocaust Memorial events to light 6 candles in memory of the 6 million Jews who perished in the Shoah. In Ireland, we also light candles in memory of all the other victims of Nazi atrocities. In memory of people with disabilities and disabling conditions, I invite John Dolan of Disability Federation of Ireland to give his reading, accompanied by Deirdre Spain of Inclusion Ireland and Kathleen McLaughlin of the Irish Wheelchair Association, who will light their candles.
The T4 euthanasia program was the mass murder and forced sterilization of thousands of disabled people. The Nazis considered all people with intellectual and physical disabilities as life unworthy of life and a burden on the state. High school textbooks contained examples of maths problems calculating the cost of care for people with disabilities compared with the costs of caring for a healthy person. Doctors and nurses collaborated in the use of lethal injections, starvation, and the murder in gas vans of disabled people. It is estimated that more than 300,000 people with disabilities were murdered in the T4 euthanasia program. We will always remember.
In memory of Poles, Slavs, and ethnic minorities, I invite Gabriela Tomkiel of the Embassy of the Republic of Poland in Dublin to give her reading, accompanied by Salome Mbugua of Akidwa and Lucas Podlawski, who will light their candles.
Those who did not fit the Nazi image of the supreme Aryan race, such as Poles, Slavs, and ethnic minorities, were murdered, displaced, forcibly sterilized, and incarcerated in concentration camps. In addition to the 3 million Polish Jews, It's estimated that 3 million non-Jewish Polish victims were also murdered in the Holocaust. Polish children were kidnapped and placed with German families to be Aryanized and reared as Germans. Commission number 3 was a program of forced sterilization of hundreds of people of African ancestry because the Nuremberg racial laws had stated that black people belonged to an inferior race. Thousands of other ethnic minorities were also victims of the Nazis. We will always remember.
In memory of the Roma people of Europe, I invite Gabi Muntian, community development worker with the Roma Project, to give her reading, accompanied by Bianca Pound and Daniel Sparace, whose grandfather survived the Transnistria camps, who will light their candles.
It is difficult to know the exact number of Roma people who were murdered by the Nazis. What estimates put the figure between 250,000. Hundreds of thousands of Roma and city people were rounded up, forced into ghettos, and deported to the concentration and death camps. They were an identifying black triangle on their camp uniforms, where they were subject to brutality, starvation, disease, medical experiments, or gas to death. We will always remember.
In memory of the homosexual men and women, I invite Natalie Vidic of the Gay and Lesbian Equality Network to give her reading, accompanied by John Duffy of Belong To and Andras Shamoy to light their candles.
The vibrant cultural and inclusive society that was prevalent in Berlin in the 1930s changed dramatically when the Nazis came to power. Thousands of gay men were arrested and imprisoned in concentration camps, where they were subjected to harder work, less food, and greater brutality than other inmates. Thousands were put to death. The criminalization and social stigmatization of homosexuals in Europe and the United States remained in force for many years after World War II. Homosexual survivors of Nazi persecution were not acknowledged as victims of the Holocaust. Some even had to serve out the terms of their original prison sentences, which did not take into account the time that they had been incarcerated in concentration camps. Few homosexual survivors of the Holocaust ever told their stories. We will always remember.
In memory of the political victims, I invite Colm O'Gorman, CEO of Amnesty International Ireland, to give his reading, accompanied by Manus O'Riordan, Ireland Secretary, International Brigade Memorial Trust, and Patricia King, General Secretary of ICTU, to light their candles.
The Nazis persecuted and murdered thousands of political opponents, some for what they did, some for what they refused to do, and some for what they were. Communists, trade unionists, and social democrats were brutally suppressed. Strikes were prohibited, trade unions and cooperatives were abolished, and their assets confiscated. As early as 1933, the Nazis established the first concentration camp, Dachau, as a place of detention for political prisoners. We will always remember.
In memory of the Christian victims of all denominations, I invite Father Peter McVerry of the Peter McVerry Trust to give his reading, accompanied by Bernadette Dunn, lay associate of the Sisters of Zion, and Reverend Terry Lilburn to light their candles.
The Nazis persecuted and murdered Catholics, Protestants, and others of Christian affiliation. Jehovah's Witnesses were targeted for refusing to salute Hitler or to serve in the German army. Thousands of priests, nuns, and teachers were put to death for opposing the Nazis and for helping to save Jews during the Holocaust. And we recall the Quakers, who worked tirelessly to assist those trying to escape from Hitler's tyranny. There were many thousands of righteous Christians and thousands of Christian victims. We will always remember.
Six candles are dedicated to the memory of the 6 million Jews, including 1.5 million children, who were annihilated in the Holocaust. Jews were murdered in concentration camps, labor camps, and death camps. Jews perished in the ghettos. Jews died of starvation and disease. Jews were shot in the forests. Jews were murdered in the streets and in their homes. Those lighting candles in memory of the Jewish victims of the Holocaust are children or grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, second and third generation. All of them lost countless members of their families in the Holocaust. I call upon Marina Herbst in memory of the many members of the Herbst and Cohn families who perished in the Holocaust. Tony Collis, whose grandfather Zoltan and great-aunt Edith survived Bergen-Belsen, and whose other family members perished in the Holocaust. Nurit Schulman, whose grandparents Abraham and Emma Humberg, uncles and aunts, and other family members perished in the Holocaust. Mark Heinbach, whose grandparents, Heinrich Heinbach and Selma Heinbach, and other family members perished in the Holocaust. Joe Katz, whose mother Frida survived Auschwitz, and whose other family members perished in the Holocaust. Charlotte Kaplan, whose father, Raphael Urbach, survived Buchenwald and Theresienstadt, and whose other family members perished in the Holocaust. I invite Rabbi Zalman Lent and Cantor Alwyn Schulman of the Irish Jewish community to recite the prayer for the repose of the souls of the departed.
O God, full of mercy, who dwells on high, grant proper rest on the sheltering wings of your divine presence, among the holy and pure who shine like the brightness of the firmament, for the souls of all the holy and pure and innocent who were killed, murdered, slaughtered, burned, drowned, and strangled at the hands of the Nazi oppressors in Auschwitz, Belzec, Bergen-Belsen, Dachau, Chelmno, Majdanek, Sobibor, Treblinka, and other extermination camps in Europe. We now pray for those souls. May their resting place be in the Garden of Eden. And so may the Master of Mercy shelter them for eternity with the cover of his wings, and may he bind their souls in a bond of eternal life. May the Lord be their inheritance, and may they repose in peace upon their heavenly resting places. And let us say, Amen.
Eile male rachamim, shochein bameromim, hamsei menucha nechona, al kanefei השכינה במעלות קדושים וטהורים במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מאירים ומזהירים לנשמות אחינו בני ישראל הקדושים והטהורים שנפלו בידי הרוצחים ונשפך דמם באושוויץ, מיידניק, טרבלינקה ובשאר מחנות השמד באירופה שנהרגו ושנשחטו ושנשרפו ושנטבעו ושנחנקו על קידוש השם בעבור שאנו מתפללים בעד הזכרת נשמותיהם. בגן עדן תהא מנוחתם. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בשאת כנפיו לעולמים. ובצרור החיים את נשמתם. אדוני הוא נחלתם. וינוחו בשלום על משכבם. ונאמר Amen.
During the Holocaust, civilized society became complicit in mass murder and genocide. Medicine and education were perverted for use in killing and disabling, and in fomenting racism and hatred. As our annual Holocaust Memorial Day ceremony draws to a close, it is incumbent upon every one of us here today, from whatever religious, ethnic, cultural, or political persuasion, to redirect ourselves to truly eradicating intolerance from our midst, and to silence the voices that seek to deny that the Holocaust ever happened. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us in this evening of solemn commemoration.